The dust cloud appeared on the horizon just after dawn, and nobody in Kingfisher, Oklahoma territory thought much of it until the rider came close enough to see clearly. The woman sat tall in the saddle atop a midnight black stallion that moved like liquid shadow across the dry prairie grass. And even from a distance, anyone could tell something was wrong with the picture. That horse was too fine for a woman traveling alone, too expensive for someone wearing trail-worn clothes and carrying no proper traveling pack. When she rode down Main Street that September morning in 1891, every eye turned to watch, and more than a few men recognized the brand on that horse's flank before she even dismounted outside the general store. "That is Marcus Thornton's stallion," whispered Deputy Bill Crawford to the blacksmith, loud enough that the words carried across the dusty street. "I would stake my badge on it." The woman heard them. Her spine stiffened, but she did not turn around. Instead, she tied the horse to the hitching post with hands that trembled slightly, then walked into the store with her head held high. She had dark auburn hair that fell in tangled waves past her shoulders, and her dress, though clean enough, had seen better days. Her boots were worn through at the heels, but her eyes were what struck anyone who looked at her directly. They were the color of stormy seas, gray-green and turbulent, holding secrets that weighed heavy on a soul too young to carry them alone. She could not have been more than 22 or 23 years old. Inside the general store, she bought hardtack, coffee, and ammunition for a rifle she did not appear to be carrying. The shopkeeper, a portly man named Henderson, took her coins without comment, but his wife watched from behind the counter with pursed lips and disapproving eyes. When the woman left, the whispers started up again, louder this time. Robert Hayes had been mending fence line on the outskirts of town when he saw her ride in. Now, 2 hours later, he stood in front of the saloon with his older brother, watching the gathering crowd outside the general store with growing unease. Robert was 26, tall and lean from years of hard work on the family ranch, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at the collar. His eyes were an unusual shade of gray-blue, sharp and observant, and right now they were focused on the woman who had just emerged back onto the street. "That is trouble," his brother Thomas said flatly. "Marcus Thornton does not take kindly to horse thieves." Remember what happened to that drifter last year? Robert remembered. The drifter had been found hanging from a cottonwood tree 3 miles outside of town. The sheriff had called it frontier justice and looked the other way. Marcus Thornton owned half the territory and had the other half in his pocket. Nobody crossed him and lived to tell about it. "Maybe she bought the horse," Robert suggested, though he did not believe it himself. Thornton never sold his prize animals, and that black stallion had been his particular favorite. "Maybe pigs will fly," Thomas replied. "Listen, brother, whatever her story is, it is not our concern. We got enough problems keeping our own ranch running without borrowing someone else's troubles." But Robert was not listening anymore. He was watching the woman's face as she noticed the crowd gathering, saw the way her eyes widened slightly, and her hand moved instinctively toward her belt where a weapon should have been. She was afraid, he realized. Underneath all that forced bravado, she was terrified. And then he saw something else. The fading bruises along her jawline that makeup had mostly hidden, the way she favored her right side as if her ribs were hurt, the defensive set of her shoulders that spoke of someone who had learned the hard way to expect violence. Before he could talk himself out of it, Robert was walking across the street. "Robert, do not be a fool," Thomas called after him, but Robert kept walking. The woman had her hand on the saddle, about to mount up when Robert reached her. Up close, he could see she was even younger than he had first thought, and there were dark circles under her eyes that spoke of many sleepless nights. She looked at him warily, like a cornered animal deciding whether to fight or flee. "Madam," he said quietly, tipping his hat. "I do not mean to intrude, but I think you might want to leave town quickly. That horse you are riding belongs to a man who does not forgive easily." Her jaw tightened. "I am aware of who the horse belongs to. Then you know what he will do when he catches up to you, and he will catch up. Marcus Thornton has men all over this territory. I will take my chances." She put her foot in the stirrup, but Robert caught the horse's bridle gently. "At least let me help you. My family owns a ranch about 5 miles north of here. You could rest there, get a proper meal, maybe trade that horse for something less conspicuous." She stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for some sign of deception or ulterior motive. Whatever she saw there must have reassured her slightly because her expression softened a fraction. "Why would you help me? You do not even know me." "No, but I know Marcus Thornton, and I know that anyone running from him probably has a good reason. You do not know anything about my reasons." "You are right, I do not. But I can see bruises under that powder on your face, and I can see you are hurting when you breathe. So I am guessing your reasons are better than most." Her eyes widened slightly, and for just a moment, her careful mask slipped and he saw the raw pain underneath. Then she pulled herself together, lifted her chin. "I appreciate the offer, but I cannot put anyone else in danger. Thornton will kill anyone who helps me." "He can try," Robert said mildly. "But my family did not build the Hayes Ranch by backing down from bullies, even rich ones. Now, you can stand here arguing with me until his men arrive. Or you can trust that I am genuinely trying to help and come with me before this situation gets worse." She glanced down the street where several men had started mounting horses, organizing what looked like it might become a posse or a lynch mob depending on who got to lead it. Her hands tightened on the reins. "If I bring trouble to your door, it will be on your conscience. I will live with it." "What should I call you, Lila?" "Lila Greene." She said it like she was confessing something. "Robert Hayes. Now let us get out of here before we have to shoot our way out." He whistled sharply, and his own horse, a sturdy roan gelding, trotted over from where he had left it tied outside the saloon. He swung into the saddle with practiced ease and looked at her expectantly. "Can you keep up on that fancy horse?" The ghost of a smile touched her lips, the first real expression he had seen from her. "Try to keep up with me." They rode out of Kingfisher at a gallop, leaving behind a cloud of dust and a crowd of confused townspeople. Thomas Hayes stood watching them disappear into the prairie landscape, shaking his head slowly. "That boy is going to get himself killed over a woman he just met," he muttered, but there was grudging admiration in his voice. Robert had always been the idealistic one, the one who believed in doing right even when it cost him. It was going to get him killed one day, but Thomas supposed there were worse ways to go. The ride to the Hayes Ranch took them across open grassland, dotted with cattle and occasional stands of cottonwood trees. The September sun beat down mercilessly, and Robert watched Lila from the corner of his eye, noting how she sat the horse with natural grace despite her obvious exhaustion. She rode like someone who had grown up in the saddle, which made her current circumstances all the more intriguing. Women who knew horses like that usually came from wealthy families, the kind who had stables and breeding programs. What had driven her to steal from a man like Thornton? They did not speak during the ride. Lila kept glancing over her shoulder, watching for pursuit, while Robert guided them along paths that would be harder to track. By the time they reached the ranch, the sun had climbed to its apex, and the heat was oppressive. The Hayes Ranch was not the largest spread in the territory, but it was well maintained and prosperous. The main house was a sturdy two-story structure built of local timber and stone, with a wraparound porch that offered shade during the brutal summer months. There were several outbuildings, a large barn, corrals, and a bunkhouse for the ranch hands. Cattle grazed in the distance, red and white dots against the golden grass. Robert's mother, Margaret Hayes, came out onto the porch as they rode up. She was a handsome woman in her early 50s, with threads of silver in her brown hair and the same gray-blue eyes her son had inherited. She took one look at Lila and seemed to understand immediately that this was not a social call. "Robert, what have you gotten yourself into now?" she asked, but her tone was more resigned than angry. "This is Lila Greene, Mama. She needs a place to stay for a while, no questions asked." Margaret Hayes studied Lila for a long moment, taking in the exhaustion, the bruises, the way the girl held herself like she expected another blow to fall at any moment. "Come inside, child. You look about ready to fall off that horse. Robert, take care of the animals and then come in for lunch. And do not think we are not going to have a serious conversation about this." "Yes, Mama." Lila dismounted carefully, wincing as her feet hit the ground. Margaret came down the steps and took her arm gently. "Can you walk? I can manage." "Pride is all well and good, but right now you need to lean on someone. Come on, I will not bite." Inside, the house was cool and well-appointed, furnished simply but comfortably. Margaret led Lila to a chair in the kitchen and poured her a glass of water from the pump. "Drink slowly." "When was the last time you ate a proper meal?" "I do not remember." Lila drank the water gratefully, her hands shaking slightly as she held the glass. "Well, we will fix that soon enough. Robert will be in shortly and we will have lunch. After that, you can rest. There is a guest room upstairs that should suit you fine." Margaret moved around the kitchen with efficient movements, stirring a pot of stew that had been simmering on the stove, slicing fresh bread. "I assume you are in some kind of trouble." "Yes, madam." "And I assume my son has decided to make your trouble his trouble, because that is exactly the kind of thing Robert would do." There was affection in her voice, mixed with exasperation. "He gets that from his father. Thomas, my oldest, he is practical. But Robert has always been the one to bring home strays and fight for the underdog." "I am not a charity case," Lila said quietly. Margaret turned to look at her, and her expression softened. "No, I do not suppose you are, but you are running from something and you are hurt and you are scared." "That is not weakness, child. That is survival. There is a difference." Lila's eyes stung suddenly with unexpected tears. She blinked them back fiercely. She had not cried when Thornton beat her, had not cried during the 3 days it took her to escape his ranch, had not cried through the long nights of riding with nothing but fear for company. She would not cry now just because a stranger showed her kindness. But it was hard, so hard, to keep that wall up when someone spoke to her with genuine warmth. Robert came in then, having washed up at the pump outside. He had taken off his hat and his dark hair was damp and curling slightly. "Smells good, Mama. Sit, both of you." Margaret ladled stew into bowls and set them on the table along with the bread and butter. "Now, while we eat, you can explain to me exactly what situation you have brought to our doorstep, Robert Hayes." So Robert explained what little he knew: the stolen horse, Marcus Thornton's reputation, the gathering crowd in town. Margaret listened without interrupting, her face growing more serious as he talked. When he finished, she turned to Lila. "And your side of the story, if you are willing to share it." Lila set down her spoon carefully. The stew was the best thing she had tasted in weeks, maybe months, but her appetite had vanished as the moment of truth arrived. "I worked for Marcus Thornton. I was his housekeeper for almost a year. He seemed like a decent employer at first, proper and respectful. But about 3 months ago, that changed. He started making advances, and when I refused him, he got angry. It got worse from there. She paused, swallowing hard against the memories. 2 weeks ago, he forced his way into my room. I fought him off with a fire poker, and he beat me badly for it. Told me I belonged to him now, that I would learn my place, or he would make sure I never worked anywhere in the territory again. He locked me in that room for 4 days with no food, only water. When he finally let me out, I knew I had to escape or I would not survive. Margaret's face had gone pale with anger. That monster, and the horse. I took it because it was the fastest animal in his stable. I knew he would come after me, but I thought if I could get far enough away, maybe across into Kansas, I could disappear. Find work somewhere he could not reach me. Lila looked down at her hands. I know it was stealing. I know I could hang for it, but I was desperate. You were defending your life, Robert said firmly. No judge would convict you for that. Lila laughed bitterly. You really believe that? Thornton owns the judges, the sheriffs, half the politicians in the territory. Who do you think they will believe? The powerful rancher or the woman he employed? I have no family, no connections, no proof of what he did except the bruises, and those will fade. Meanwhile, I am sitting here having admitted to stealing a horse worth more than I could earn in 5 years. She is right, Robert, Margaret said quietly. In a just world, she would find protection under the law, but this is not always a just world, especially not for women. We all know what happens to girls who accuse powerful men of such things. They are called liars and worse. Robert's jaw tightened. So what do? We cannot just turn her over to Thornton. He will kill her. No, we cannot do that, but we need to think strategically. Thornton will come looking for his horse. When he does, we need to have our story straight. Margaret tapped her fingers on the table, thinking. Here is what we do. First, Lila, you hide that stallion in our back pasture with our other horses, mixed in with the herd. From a distance, one black horse looks much like another. Second, we say you arrived here on foot, that you are a cousin of mine from back east, come to visit and help around the ranch. Third, if anyone asks, Robert found you on the road after you were attacked by bandits. That explains the bruises and why you have nothing with you. You would lie for me. Lila looked between them, disbelieving. Risk your reputation and possibly your lives. My son already decided to do that when he brought you here, Margaret said simply. I am just trying to make sure his noble impulses do not get us all killed. Now finish your stew. You need your strength. They spent the rest of the afternoon preparing for the confrontation they all knew was coming. Robert moved the black stallion to a far pasture where it would be difficult to spot, taking care to mix it in with several other dark horses. Lila went upstairs to the guest room and bathed for the first time in days, washing away the trail dust and some of the fear. Margaret found her some proper clothes, dresses that had belonged to Robert's sister before she married and moved to Texas. As evening approached, Thomas Hayes returned from town with news. Thornton's men were in Kingfisher asking questions. Deputy Crawford told them he saw a woman matching Lila's description riding out on the Thornton stallion, heading north. They will be searching every ranch in this direction. We can expect them tomorrow, maybe sooner. Then we better make sure our story is airtight, Robert said. He looked at Lila, who had come downstairs wearing a simple blue dress that brought out the color of her eyes. Can you remember being my mother's cousin, just arrived from Missouri? I can be whoever I need to be to survive, Lila said quietly. That night, Lila lay awake in the guest room staring at the ceiling. The bed was soft, the room comfortable, and for the first time in weeks she felt physically safe. But her mind would not rest. These people had taken her in without hesitation, had created an elaborate lie to protect her, were willing to face down one of the most dangerous men in the territory for a stranger. Why? What did they gain from this? She thought about Robert Hayes, the quiet cowboy who had approached her in town when everyone else saw only a criminal. There had been no judgment in his eyes, only concern and a determination to help. She was not used to that kind of goodness. In her experience, men wanted something from women always. But when Robert looked at her, she did not see calculation or lust. She saw only genuine kindness, and it unsettled her more than any threat could have. Down the hall, Robert lay in his own bed, equally sleepless. He kept seeing Lila's face when she talked about what Thornton had done to her, the way her voice had stayed steady even as her hands shook, the courage it must have taken to fight back and then to run. She was brave, he thought, and alone. And now, her survival depended on his family's ability to outmaneuver a man who had spent decades building his power through intimidation and violence. He wondered what kind of fool he was, risking everything for a woman he had just met. But even as the thought formed, he knew he would do it again. Some things were worth the risk. Some people deserved to be protected, regardless of the cost. His father had taught him that before he died, had showed him through years of example that real strength meant defending those who could not defend themselves. Robert intended to honor that lesson, even if it meant going up against Marcus Thornton himself. The next morning dawned clear and hot. Margaret insisted on maintaining normal routines, so Robert went out to check on the cattle while Thomas worked on repairing a section of fence. Lila helped Margaret in the kitchen, learning the layout of the house and the rhythms of ranch life. They were snapping green beans for dinner when the sound of horses approaching sent them all to the windows. 6 riders came up the road to the main house, and even from a distance, there was no mistaking the man who led them. Marcus Thornton sat his horse like a king surveying his domain, a tall man in his 50s with iron-gray hair and a face that might have been handsome if not for the cruelty that twisted his features. He wore expensive clothes, a silver-trimmed saddle, and a gun belt that held 2 pearl-handled revolvers. The men who rode with him were hired guns, the kind who followed money and asked no questions. Robert came striding up from the barn, and Thomas appeared from the other direction. They met their mother and Lila on the porch as Thornton's group rode into the yard. "Stay calm," Margaret murmured to Lila. "You are my cousin. You have nothing to fear." But Lila's face had gone pale and her hands were clenched so tight her knuckles had turned white. Robert moved slightly closer to her, a subtle gesture of protection that did not go unnoticed by anyone. Thornton dismounted with the casual arrogance of a man used to being obeyed. "Margaret Hayes, it has been a while." "Marcus." Margaret's tone was cool but polite. "What brings you to our ranch?" "I believe you know. I am looking for a horse thief. Young woman, dark hair, riding my prize stallion. She was seen heading this direction yesterday. I thought perhaps she might have stopped here." "We have not seen anyone like that," Margaret said steadily. "The only visitor we have had is my cousin Lila, who arrived from Missouri 2 days ago." Thornton's eyes moved to Lila, and Robert saw her flinch slightly. It was subtle, but Thornton saw it too, and something like recognition flickered across his face. "Your cousin, you say? Interesting." "She looks remarkably like my former housekeeper." "I assure you, my cousin has never worked as anyone's housekeeper. She was raised in St. Louis in a respectable family. Then she will not mind if I ask her a few questions." Thornton stepped toward the porch, but Robert moved to block his path. "Actually, she would mind. My mother said we have not seen your horse or your thief. That should be answer enough." Thornton looked at Robert like he was seeing him for the first time, and what he saw seemed to amuse him. "Robert Hayes, I remember you. Your father and I had some dealings before he passed. He was a reasonable man. I hope you inherited that quality." "My father taught me to protect people who needed protecting. I definitely inherited that. Is that a fact? Thornton's hand rested casually on his gun belt. Well, protecting horse thieves is a crime itself, boy. I would hate to see you hang alongside her when I find proof of what she did. Proof of what? Thomas stepped forward, joining his brother. All I hear is accusations. You say someone stole your horse. Fine. You say you saw someone who looked like your former employee riding north. Also fine. But you have not proven anything. You have not found your horse. You have not found this woman you claim stole it. All you have done is ride onto our property making threats. One of Thornton's men, a lean gunfighter with cold eyes, moved his hand toward his weapon. Instantly, the ranch hands who had been working nearby started drifting closer, their own hands near their guns. The tension ratcheted up sharply. "Search the property," Thornton ordered. "Do you have a warrant?" Margaret asked sharply. "Because unless you have legal authority, you are trespassing." "I do not need a warrant to recover my own property. You do if you want to search someone else's land. And before you start thinking about using force, Marcus, remember that we may not be as rich as you, but we have friends too. The other ranchers around here do not take kindly to powerful men throwing their weight around. Push too hard and you will find yourself facing more opposition than you bargained for." It was a calculated risk, reminding Thornton that his power had limits. For a long moment, he stared at Margaret with barely concealed fury. Then, slowly, he smiled. "Very well. I will respect your property rights. For now. But hear me well, all of you. That horse is worth $5,000. The woman who stole it is a criminal and a liar. When I find proof, and I will find proof, everyone who helped her will face justice. And my justice is considerably less gentle than what the law provides." He mounted his horse in one smooth motion and looked down at Lila, who had been standing frozen through the entire exchange. "I know it is you, girl. I can see it in your eyes. You can hide behind these people for now, but eventually you will have to come out. And when you do, I will be waiting. What I did to you before will seem like a mercy compared to what is coming." Then he wheeled his horse around and rode off, his men following. They did not leave the property entirely, though. Robert could see them taking up positions on the main road, settling in to watch and wait. "He is going to lay siege to us," Thomas said grimly. "Make it impossible for us to do business, drive off our customers, wait until we are desperate enough to bargain." "Let him try," Margaret said, but there was worry in her eyes now. "We have enough supplies to last a while. And we can send someone to town the back way, through the creek bed where his men cannot easily follow. We are not helpless." Lila had not moved or spoken. She stood on the porch staring at the place where Thornton had disappeared, and tears were finally running down her face. "I am so sorry. I have brought ruin to your family. You should give me up. It is not worth this." Robert turned to her and took her gently by the shoulders, waiting until she looked up at him. "Listen to me. We are not giving you up. Not now, not ever. What that man did to you was wrong. What he is trying to do now is wrong, and if standing against him costs us, then it costs us. Some things are more important than money or comfort." "Why do you care so much?" she whispered. "You do not know me. Maybe not yet, but I know enough to know you are worth protecting. And I know that if we let men like Thornton do whatever they want because we are too afraid to stop them, then we lose something a lot more valuable than a ranch." Margaret came over and put her arm around Lila. "Come inside, dear. Let us have some coffee and figure out our next steps. Robert, Thomas, you two start planning. We need to secure the ranch and make sure our hands are armed and ready. If Thornton decides to escalate this, I want us prepared." The next few days fell into an uneasy routine. Thornton's men maintained their watch on the main road, but made no move to attack. Meanwhile, Life on the Hayes Ranch continued as normally as possible under siege conditions. Lila helped Margaret with cooking and cleaning, learning the 100 small tasks that kept a ranch house running. She also spent time with Robert, who taught her to shoot properly. She had handled guns before, but never with any real training. "Hold it steady," he instructed, standing behind her as she aimed at a row of tin cans set up on the fence. "Do not jerk the trigger, just squeeze it gently. Let the gun surprise you." She fired and the can flew off the fence. A small smile crossed her face. "I hit it." "You did. Try the next one." They spent an hour like this, Robert patiently coaching while Lila practiced. She was a quick learner, her natural coordination translating well to marksmanship. But more than the skill itself, Robert noticed how she seemed to gain confidence with each successful shot. The frightened, hunted look began to fade from her eyes, replaced by something fiercer and more determined. When they finished, she turned to him and said, "Thank you, not just for this, but for everything. I do not understand why you have done so much for me, but I am grateful." "You do not need to keep thanking me," Robert said. He hesitated, then added, "Can I ask you something, I suppose? What will you do when this is over? Assuming we can resolve things with Thornton, where will you go?" Lila looked away across the prairie. "I do not know. I have been so focused on just surviving each day that I have not thought much past that. I suppose I will need to find work somewhere. Maybe try to get to California. I heard they are more progressive there, more opportunities for women. That is a long journey to make alone. I have made long journeys before." She glanced at him sidelong. "Why do you ask?" Robert felt suddenly awkward, like a schoolboy instead of a 26-year-old man. "I was just thinking that you seem to fit in well here. My mother likes you. Thomas has stopped grumbling about the trouble you brought, and I enjoy your company. If you wanted to stay, there would be a place for you. A job, I mean. We could always use help around the ranch." "A job," Lila repeated, and something flickered in her expression that he could not quite read. "That is a generous offer. It is a sincere one, think about it at least." That evening, as Margaret and Lila were preparing dinner, the older woman said casually, "My son is falling in love with you, you know." Lila nearly dropped the pot she was carrying. "What? No, he is just being kind. Robert has always been kind, but this is different. I see the way he looks at you, the way he finds excuses to be near you. He is smitten, even if he has not fully admitted it to himself yet." "That is impossible. We barely know each other." "Love does not follow a timetable, dear. Sometimes it strikes like lightning, fast and undeniable." Margaret smiled. "The question is, how do you feel about him?" Lila set down the pot and gripped the edge of the table. "I do not know. I am grateful to him, of course, and he is handsome and good and everything a woman should want, but I am terrified, Mrs. Hayes. The last man who showed interest in me turned out to be a monster. How do I trust that Robert is different? How do I trust my own judgment after I was so wrong about Thornton? You trust by taking small risks and seeing what happens. Robert would never hurt you the way Thornton did. I know my son. But you do not have to take my word for it. Watch him. Test him if you need to. You will see that his goodness is genuine. And what if I cannot be what he needs? What if I am too damaged by what happened to me?" Margaret came around the table and took Lila's face in her hands. "Listen to me, child. What Thornton did to you does not define who you are. You are strong and brave, and you have survived things that would have broken other people. Any man lucky enough to win your heart should count himself blessed. Do not let Thornton steal your future along with everything else he took." The words broke something loose in Lila, and suddenly she was crying in earnest, great heaving sobs that she had been holding back for weeks. Margaret held her and let her cry, stroking her hair and murmuring soft comfort. When the storm finally passed, Lila felt wrung out but somehow lighter, as if acknowledging the pain had lessened its power. "Thank you," she whispered. "No thanks needed. Now wash your face and help me finish this dinner. Men get ornery when they are hungry." 2 weeks passed. Thornton's men remained on watch, but they made no aggressive moves. It was a war of attrition, Thornton trying to starve out the Hayes family socially and economically. True to his threat, he spread word throughout the territory that anyone who did business with the Hayes ranch would face his displeasure. Several buyers who had contracted for cattle suddenly backed out. Supplies ordered from town went missing. The pressure was subtle but relentless. Thomas wanted to confront Thornton directly, force a resolution one way or another, but Margaret counseled patience. "He wants us to act rashly. He wants an excuse to claim we attacked him so he can bring the full force of the law down on us. We wait him out. How long can we wait?" Thomas demanded. "We have bills to pay, hands to feed. Every day this drags on costs us money." "I know, but we will find a way." Robert spent more and more time with Lila. They talked while doing chores, during meals, in the evenings on the porch while the sun set over the prairie. He learned about her childhood in a small town in Missouri, how her parents had died in a typhoid outbreak when she was 16, how she had been on her own ever since, moving from job to job, always just barely scraping by. She learned about his father, who had built the Hayes Ranch from nothing and taught his sons the value of hard work and integrity. About his sister Emma, who had scandalously married a preacher and moved to Texas to help him build a church. About his dreams of expanding the ranch, maybe starting a horse breeding program. "Like Thornton's?" Lila asked, and then wished she had not brought him up, but Robert shook his head. "No, not like his. He breeds horses to show off his wealth and power. I would want to breed them for ordinary people, good solid work horses that families can afford and depend on, something useful." "That sounds like you," she said softly, "always thinking about helping others. Is that such a bad thing?" "No, it is remarkable. I am just not sure the world deserves people like you." He looked at her seriously. "The world does not get what it deserves, good or bad. It gets what we make of it, and I would rather try to make it better than sit back and accept cruelty because it is common." Lila found herself falling for him, slowly and then all at once. It was not just his goodness, though that was part of it. It was the way he treated her like an equal, not some fragile thing that needed to be handled carefully. It was his quiet strength, his sense of humor, the way his whole face lit up when he smiled. It was how safe she felt around him, a feeling she had not experienced in so long she had almost forgotten it was possible. But with the falling came fear. What if this was temporary? What if once Thornton was dealt with, Robert realized he had been caught up in the drama and did not actually want her? What if she was just a project to him, a damsel to rescue? She had been fooled before by men who seemed kind. How could she trust this feeling? The answer came unexpectedly one afternoon when Robert found her in the barn, crying over a letter. One of the ranch hands had brought it from town, and the contents had destroyed her fragile peace. "Lila, what is wrong?" Robert knelt beside her, his face creased with concern. She handed him the letter wordlessly. It was from an attorney in Kingfisher, informing her that Marcus Thornton had filed formal charges of horse theft against a woman matching her description. A warrant had been issued for her arrest. Whoever she was and wherever she was hiding, the law was now officially looking for her. "They will come for me," she said dully. "Thornton must have paid off the judge to issue the warrant without proper evidence. Now it does not matter that I was defending myself. Now I am a wanted criminal." Robert read the letter twice, his jaw tightening. "This is not legal. They cannot issue a warrant without evidence or testimony." "Apparently they can if you have enough money." Lila stood up, wiping her eyes. I have to leave. Tonight, if I stay, I will bring the law down on your family. They could arrest all of you for harboring a fugitive. You are not leaving. Robert, be reasonable. This changes everything. No, it does not. He stood too, moving close to her. It just means we need a better plan. We cannot hide forever, I know that, so we stop hiding. We fight back. How? How do we fight a man who owns judges and sheriffs? We find someone he does not own. There is a federal marshal in Guthrie, a man named James Hawthorne. My father dealt with him years ago, said he was honest. If we can get to him, tell him your story, he might be able to help. Or he might just arrest me on the spot. Maybe. But doing nothing guarantees you lose. At least this way you have a chance. Robert took her hands in his, and the contact sent warmth through her. Listen to me. I am not going to let Thornton destroy you. We will go to Guthrie together. We will tell the marshal what really happened. And if he will not listen, then we will figure out something else. But I promise you we will find a way through this. Why do you care so much? The question burst out of her again, louder this time, almost angry. Why are you willing to risk everything for me? I am nobody. I have nothing to offer you. This is insane. Robert was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was low and intense. You want to know why? Because from the moment I saw you in town, trying so hard to be brave when you were terrified, something in me recognized something in you. Because every minute I spend with you makes me want to know you better. Because you are smart and strong and you have survived things that would have broken most people. Because when you smile, which is not often enough, it feels like the sun coming out. Because I am falling in love with you, Lila Greene, and that might be insane, but it is true. So yes, I am willing to risk everything. Not because you are nobody, but because to me you are everything. The world seemed to stop. Lila stared at him, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. You love me. I do. I know it is fast. I know you probably think I am crazy. But I have never been more sure of anything in my life. Robert, I am wanted by the law. I have nothing. I come with more trouble than any reasonable person should take on. I do not care about reasonable. I care about you. He cupped her face gently with one hand. Tell me you do not feel anything for me, and I will step back. I will still help you, still protect you, but I will not push for more. But if you feel even a fraction of what I feel, then say so. Because we do not know what is going to happen tomorrow or the next day, and I do not want to waste time pretending I do not care when I do. Lila felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to jump into unknown water. Terror and exhilaration warred inside her. She could say no, could protect herself from potential heartbreak, could keep the walls up that had kept her safe for so long. Or she could take the risk, could trust that this good man meant what he said, could let herself feel the love that was already growing in her own heart despite all her efforts to prevent it. I feel it, she whispered. I feel it too, and it terrifies me. Me too, he admitted, and then he smiled. But let us be terrified together. When he kissed her, it was gentle and questioning, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But Lila did not pull away. Instead, she leaned into him, wrapping her arms around his neck and kissing him back with all the pent-up emotion of the past weeks. It felt like coming home to a place she had never been, like finding something she had not known she was looking for. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Robert rested his forehead against hers. We will figure this out, together. Together, she agreed. That evening they told Margaret and Thomas about the plan to go to Guthrie. Thomas was skeptical. Federal marshals are not known for being sympathetic to horse thieves. She is not a horse thief. She is a victim who took desperate action to save her own life. That is a fine distinction that may be lost on a lawman. It is worth trying, Margaret said firmly. What other choice do we have? Wait here until Thornton's patience runs out and he sends his hired guns to take her by force. At least this way we are acting instead of reacting." "Fine. But I am coming with you. If you are going to do this fool thing, you will not do it alone." They left before dawn 2 days later, slipping out through the back pasture and taking trails that Thornton's watchers would not see. Margaret stayed behind to manage the ranch, but she packed them food and supplies and hugged each of them tightly before they left. "Be careful," she told Robert. "And take care of that girl. She is special." "I know, Mama." The ride to Guthrie took 2 days. They traveled carefully, avoiding main roads and staying off the skyline where they might be spotted. Lila rode the roan gelding while Robert rode a sturdy bay. They had left the black stallion hidden at the ranch, though its presence was a ticking time bomb. Eventually, Thornton would find proof it was there, and when he did, the consequences would be severe. During the long hours of riding, Robert and Lila talked more, sharing stories and dreams and fears. She learned that he had almost gotten married once, years ago, to a girl from town who had decided she wanted a more exciting life than a ranch could provide. She had run off to Denver with a traveling salesman, leaving Robert heartbroken and wary. He learned that Lila had taught herself to read as a child, borrowing books from a kind teacher, and that she still dreamed of getting an education, maybe even becoming a teacher herself. "You would be a good teacher," Robert said. "You are patient and you explain things clearly. I have noticed that when you help my mother with the household accounts. I like numbers. They make sense. They follow rules." Unlike people, she did not say, but he heard it anyway. They camped the first night in a grove of cottonwoods near a stream. Thomas insisted on taking first watch while Robert and Lila tried to sleep. But Lila found herself restless, staring up at the stars through the leaves, thinking about what they were riding toward. So much could go wrong. The marshal could refuse to help. He could arrest her on the spot. Thornton could have men in Guthrie watching for her. They could be riding into a trap. "You are thinking too loud," Robert murmured from where he lay a few feet away. "I can hear your mind working from here. Sorry, do not be sorry, come here." He held out his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, Lila moved closer, letting him draw her against his side. The contact was comforting without being demanding, his warmth seeping into her, calming some of the anxiety. "What if this does not work?" she asked quietly. "Then we try something else." "You make it sound simple. The alternative is giving up, and I do not see you as someone who gives up." She tilted her head to look at him. "How do you have so much faith?" "My father used to say that faith is not about knowing things will work out. It is about deciding they are worth fighting for regardless of the odds. You are worth fighting for, Lila. Whatever happens, I do not regret any of this." She kissed him then, pouring into it all the gratitude and fear and love she could not quite put into words. He kissed her back just as intensely, his hand coming up to tangle in her hair. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Thomas cleared his throat loudly from where he sat keeping watch. "Keep it appropriate, you two. We are on a dangerous mission, not a courting picnic." Robert laughed, and Lila found herself smiling despite everything. "Sorry, Thomas. Sure you are. Now get some sleep. We have a long day tomorrow." They reached Guthrie in the late afternoon of the second day. The town was larger than Kingfisher, more established, with proper brick buildings and a railroad depot. It was the territorial capital, bustling with government officials and businessmen. Finding the federal marshal's office was easy. Convincing him to see them was harder. "Marshal Hawthorne is a busy man," the deputy at the desk said dismissively. "You cannot just walk in demanding his attention. Tell him Robert Hayes is here. My father was Samuel Hayes and they had dealings some years back. Tell him it is urgent." The deputy sighed but disappeared into the back office. They waited in uncomfortable silence. Lila's hands clenched tight in her lap. What if this was a mistake? What if the deputy was already sending someone to arrest her? She was about to suggest they leave when the door opened and a tall man in his 50s emerged. James Hawthorne had a weathered face and sharp gray eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He looked at them appraisingly, his gaze lingering on Lila. "Samuel Hayes' boy. I heard he passed. My condolences." "Come on back." His office was small but organized, with maps on the walls and files neatly stacked on the desk. Hawthorne sat down and gestured for them to do the same. "Now, what is so urgent that you traveled all this way?" Robert glanced at Lila, who nodded slightly. Then he laid out the whole story, leaving nothing out. He explained how they met, what Thornton had done to Lila, how she had taken the horse out of desperation, the siege on the Hayes ranch, the arrest warrant. Hawthorne listened without interrupting, his expression giving nothing away. When Robert finished, the marshal leaned back in his chair. "That is quite a tale. Do you have any proof of these accusations against Thornton?" "The bruises have mostly faded," Lila said quietly, "but there are still marks where he hit me across the back with his belt." And his housekeeper, a woman named Sarah McCann, she knew what was happening. "She tried to help me. If you could find her, she might testify." "Might is not will. And even if I could find her, getting someone to testify against Marcus Thornton is like pulling teeth from a grizzly bear. The man has a long reach and a longer memory." Hawthorne studied Lila intently. "You say he locked you in a room for 4 days?" "Yes, sir." "Anyone else see you during that time?" "Sarah brought me water, and I heard his foreman, a man named Jack Ridley, arguing with Thornton about it. Ridley said it was going too far, that people would notice, but Thornton told him to mind his own business." Hawthorne wrote this down. "Jack Ridley. I know that name. He is a tough customer, but he has a reputation for honesty. If I could get him to talk, that might be something." He looked at Robert. "You understand what you are risking here. Thornton will not take kindly to being investigated. He will come after you and your family." "He is already doing that," Robert said. "At this point we are all in. We want justice. Justice and reality are not always the same thing. But I will tell you what I will do. I will investigate these claims. I will talk to witnesses, including this Sarah McCann and Jack Ridley if I can find them. And I will look into how that arrest warrant was issued, because you are right, it does not smell proper. But this will take time, and in the meantime, Miss Greene is still wanted. I cannot let you leave here without addressing that." Lila's heart sank. "You are arresting me. I should. But I am going to take a page from your young man's book and make a judgment call based on character instead of circumstances. You do not strike me as a hardened criminal, Miss Greene. You strike me as someone who has been through hell and did what she had to do to survive. So here is what we are going to do. I am going to place you in the protective custody of Robert Hayes here under his personal recognizance. That means, Robert, you are responsible for making sure she does not run. If she disappears, you answer for it. Understood?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Now get out of my office. I have work to do. Find yourselves a hotel, stay out of trouble, and check back with me in 3 days. I should know more by then." Outside, Lila let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. "He believed me." "He believed in giving you a fair chance," Thomas corrected. "That is not quite the same thing as believing you, but it is a start. Better than I expected, honestly." They found a small hotel near the edge of town and rented 2 rooms, one for Thomas and one for Robert and Lila. The proprietress raised her eyebrows at the sleeping arrangements, until Robert hastily explained they were recently married. This required him to then go buy a cheap ring from a general store and invent an entire backstory about a quick wedding before they left for Guthrie. By the time they finally made it upstairs, all 3 of them were exhausted. "You realize you just told half of Guthrie that we are married," Lila said once they were alone in their room. It was simple but clean, with a bed, a washstand, and a single window overlooking the street. "I know. I am sorry." It was the only thing I could think of to explain why we would be sharing a room without starting rumors that would make everything worse. "No, I understand. It is just strange. We have been courting for all of 2 weeks, and now we are pretending to be married." She sat down on the bed, suddenly feeling the weight of the past days catching up with her. Robert sat beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "I will sleep on the floor. I do not want you to feel uncomfortable." "Robert, you do not have to do that. I trust you." And she realized as she said it that it was true. Somewhere along the way, despite all her fears and defenses, she had come to trust this man completely. Still, it is proper. "Nothing about this situation is proper." She turned to face him. "We are pretending to be married. We are running from a powerful man who wants me dead. We are putting our faith in a federal marshal we just met. Propriety seems like the least of our concerns." He smiled slightly. "When you put it like that." They arranged themselves awkwardly, both lying on top of the covers on opposite sides of the bed, leaving space between them. But as the room grew dark and the sounds of the town faded, Lila found herself moving closer, drawn by the warmth and security Robert represented. He put his arm around her shoulders, and she rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "What will we do if the marshal cannot help?" she asked into the darkness. "We keep going. Maybe head to Texas or California like you said. Start over somewhere Thornton cannot reach. That would mean giving up your ranch, your family, everything you have built. It would mean keeping you safe. That is more important." She lifted her head to look at him. "You really mean that?" "I really mean that." His hand came up to stroke her hair gently. "Lila, I told you I am falling in love with you. I am past the falling now. I am in love with you. That means your safety and happiness matter more to me than anything else. A ranch is just a place. A place without you in it would not feel like home anymore." Tears pricked her eyes. "No one has ever said anything like that to me before." Then they were fools who did not see what they had. He leaned down and kissed her forehead. "You should sleep. Tomorrow might bring answers, good or bad, and we need to be ready." She wanted to say more, wanted to tell him that she loved him too, that he had become essential to her in ways she did not fully understand. But the words caught in her throat, too big and frightening to release. So instead, she held him tighter and let sleep take her. The 3 days of waiting were agonizing. They tried to occupy themselves by exploring Guthrie, but everywhere they went, Lila felt exposed, certain that someone would recognize her or that Thornton's men would appear. Robert stayed close, his hand often resting on the small of her back or holding hers, a constant reassurance. Thomas spent his time asking discreet questions around town, trying to gauge the political situation and Thornton's influence. On the morning of the 3rd day, they returned to Marshal Hawthorne's office. He looked tired but satisfied, which Lila took as a good sign. "I have been busy," he said without preamble. "I found Sarah McCann working at a boarding house in Stillwater. Once I convinced her I was not working for Thornton, she talked. Confirmed everything you said, Miss Greene. Said she saw the bruises, heard you screaming when he beat you, tried to help but was too scared to do more. She is willing to testify if it comes to that." "And Jack Ridley?" Robert asked. "Harder nut to crack, but I got him too. He is disgusted with Thornton, has been for a while, but he was under contract and needed the money. When I offered him protection and guaranteed he would still get paid, he opened up. He confirmed the imprisonment, the threats, all of it. Said Thornton bragged to him about how he was going to break you, Miss Greene, how he had done it to other women before and nobody ever stopped him because he was untouchable." Lila felt sick. There were others, at least 3 that Ridley knew about. All young women who worked for him, all driven off his property or worse when they resisted his advances. One disappeared entirely and Ridley suspects foul play, though he has no proof. "So what happens now?" Robert asked. Hawthorne leaned forward. "Now I have enough to bring formal charges against Marcus Thornton for assault, unlawful imprisonment, and intimidation. The territorial judge owes me a favor, and he is not in Thornton's pocket. I can get a warrant issued for Thornton's arrest. As for the horse theft charge against Miss Greene, given the circumstances, I am recommending it be dismissed. Self-defense extends to taking necessary measures to preserve one's life, and a good lawyer could argue that taking the fastest horse available falls under that category." "But what about the horse itself?" Lila asked. "It is still on the Hayes Ranch. I did take it." "Technically, but we can resolve that by having you return it once Thornton is in custody. I do not think any jury in the territory would convict you once they hear the full story." Relief washed over Lila so powerfully she felt dizzy. "You are really going to arrest him, Marcus Thornton?" "I am really going to try. He will not go quietly, and he will lawyer up faster than a duck on a June bug, but with the testimony I have gathered, I think we have a case. It helps that you are not the first woman he has done this to. Shows a pattern of behavior that even his money and influence will have trouble explaining away." "When will you arrest him?" Thomas asked. "Tomorrow morning. I am assembling a team of deputies, and we will ride out to his ranch at first light. I want you 3 to stay here in Guthrie until it is done. If something goes wrong, I do not want you in the line of fire." "With respect, Marshal, this is personal for us," Robert said. "We would like to be there." "Absolutely not. This is official business and I will not have civilians complicating things." Hawthorne's tone left no room for argument. "You will wait here and I will send word once it is resolved." They had to be satisfied with that. The marshal stood, indicating the meeting was over. "One more thing, Miss Greene. I am sorry for what you endured. No woman should have to go through that. If I can put Thornton away for a long time, I will. That is a promise. Thank you, Marshal, for believing me. Thank you for being brave enough to speak up. That takes more courage than most people have." Back at the hotel, the hours crawled by. None of them could settle, knowing that somewhere not too far away, a confrontation was being prepared that would determine their futures. Lila tried to read a book from the hotel lobby, but the words blurred together meaninglessly. Robert paced the room like a caged animal. Thomas cleaned his gun 3 times, a nervous habit he fell back on when stressed. That night, Lila lay awake long after Robert had fallen asleep beside her. She thought about everything that had happened, how her life had changed so drastically in just a few weeks. A month ago, she had been trapped in Thornton's house, believing she had no options, no future. Now she was free, protected by people who cared about her, with a man who loved her and a family who had welcomed her. It seemed impossible, like a dream she would wake up from at any moment. She thought about what came next. If Hawthorne succeeded in arresting Thornton, if the charges stuck, if she was cleared of the horse theft, what then? Robert had talked about starting over, but maybe they would not have to. Maybe she could stay at the Hayes Ranch, make a life there. Maybe she could accept the love Robert offered without fear that it would turn into something dark and twisted. The word marriage floated through her mind. They had pretended for the hotel proprietress, but what about making it real? The thought both thrilled and terrified her. Was she ready for that? Was he? They had known each other such a short time. But then again, time was not always the measure of connection. She had worked for Thornton for nearly a year and never truly known him at all. She had known Robert for weeks and felt like he saw straight into her soul. Beside her, Robert stirred and his arm tightened around her waist, pulling her closer even in sleep. She settled against him, letting his warmth and presence soothe her racing thoughts. Whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together. That was enough for now. The next day passed with agonizing slowness. They waited in the hotel, jumping at every footstep in the hallway, every sound from the street. Thomas went out periodically to check if any news had arrived, but each time he returned shaking his head. As evening approached, Lila began to fear the worst. What if Thornton had been tipped off and escaped? What if there had been violence and the marshal was hurt or killed? What if Thornton had managed to turn the situation around and was now coming for them? Just after sunset, there was a knock at the door. Robert answered it to find one of Hawthorne's deputies, a young man with a tired but triumphant expression. "The marshal sent me to give you the news. Marcus Thornton was arrested this morning without incident. He is currently in custody in Guthrie, awaiting arraignment. The charges have been formally filed, and the territorial judge has agreed to hear the case. Marshal Hawthorne wants you to know that Miss Greene is cleared of the horse theft charge. The warrant has been dismissed." Robert let out a whoop of joy and turned to sweep Lila up in his arms, spinning her around. "You hear that? It is over. You are free." Lila was laughing and crying at the same time, holding onto Robert as he spun her. "Is it really over? Can we really go home?" "You can head back whenever you like," the deputy said, smiling at their reaction. "Though the marshal would appreciate it if Miss Greene could stay in town for a few more days. He might need her testimony when the case goes to trial." "I will stay as long as necessary," Lila promised. "Whatever helps put him away." After the deputy left, the three of them celebrated with dinner at the best restaurant in town. Thomas raised his glass in a toast. "To justice, finally being served, and to my fool brother who risked everything on a hunch and turned out to be right." "To second chances," Robert countered, looking at Lila. "And to brave women who refuse to be victims." "To family," Lila said softly. "The kind you choose and the kind who chooses you back." They clinked glasses, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Lila felt genuinely happy. The weight that had been crushing her chest for months lifted, and she could breathe fully again. She was free. Thornton was in custody. The nightmare was over. Marshal Hawthorne visited them the next morning with more details. "Thornton is screaming about false charges and demanding his lawyer, which he is entitled to. But the evidence is solid. With the testimony from Sarah McCann and Jack Ridley, plus Miss Greene's account and the pattern of behavior with other women, I believe we can get a conviction." "The trial is set for 3 weeks from now." 3 weeks, Lila repeated. "That seems fast. The judge wants to move quickly on this. Thornton's lawyers are already trying to get the charges dismissed, and the longer it drags out, the more time they have to intimidate witnesses or buy influence. A quick trial serves justice better." "What do you need from me?" Lila asked. "I need you to be willing to testify, to stand up in court and tell your story in front of a jury. It will not be pleasant. Thornton's lawyers will try to discredit you, to make it seem like you were a willing participant or that you are lying for attention. You will have to be strong." Lila lifted her chin. "I can be strong. I want to testify, not just for me but for the other women he hurt. Someone needs to speak for them. Good. We will prepare you, make sure you know what to expect. But understand that even with strong evidence, rich men sometimes escape justice. I do not want you to get your hopes up too high." "I understand. But at least he will face a trial." "That is more than most women in my situation ever get." After Hawthorne left, Robert took Lila's hand. "You do not have to do this alone. I will be there in the courtroom every day. Whatever you need, whatever helps you get through it, just tell me. What I need is to stop being afraid of him. Even locked up, even facing trial, I am still afraid. I need to walk into that courtroom and look him in the eye and not flinch. That is what I need. Then that is what we will work on. Every day until the trial, we will practice. You will tell your story to me, to Thomas, to my mother when we get back to the ranch. We will do it so many times that it becomes just words, not pain. You will take the power back from him, piece by piece. And that was what they did. Thomas rode back to the ranch to reassure Margaret and manage things while Robert and Lila stayed in Guthrie. Each day, they walked through her testimony, with Robert playing the role of aggressive defense attorney, asking harsh questions, trying to rattle her. It was painful, dredging up the memories over and over, but gradually Lila found she could talk about what had happened without falling apart. The events became facts to be stated rather than traumas to be relived. Marshal Hawthorne introduced her to the prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Catherine Porter who was one of the few female lawyers practicing in the territory. Porter was impressed with Lila's composure and her clear recollection of details. "You will make an excellent witness," she said. "Just remember, speak directly to the jury. Make them see you as a person, not just a victim. Tell your story like you are talking to your neighbors. Simple, honest, direct." The 3 weeks passed in a strange blur of preparation and waiting. Robert and Lila spent every day together, and the bond between them deepened from affection into something more profound. They talked about everything, sharing hopes and fears and dreams. He told her about wanting to expand the ranch, maybe get into politics someday to help pass laws protecting workers' rights. She told him about her dream of opening a school someday, teaching children who came from poor families like hers, giving them opportunities she had not had. "You could do that near the ranch," Robert suggested one evening as they sat on a bench outside the hotel, watching the stars emerge. "There are plenty of families in the area who would send their children to a good teacher. You could start small, maybe use one of the outbuildings and grow from there." "You make it sound so possible." "Because it is possible. Lila, anything is possible now. You are free. You have your whole life ahead of you. What do you want to do with it?" She looked at him seriously. "I want to spend it with you, if you will have me." Robert's breath caught. "Are you saying what I think you are saying?" "I am saying I love you, Robert Hayes. I am saying that you saved my life, not just by helping me escape Thornton, but by showing me what goodness looks like. What real love looks like. I am saying that when I think about my future, you are in every vision of it. So yes, if you are asking, the answer is yes." "I have not asked yet," he said, but his eyes were shining. He slid off the bench and knelt on one knee right there on the dusty street. "Lila Greene, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Not pretend, not for show, but really and truly." "Yes," she said through her tears. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He stood and kissed her, and people walking by smiled at the young couple so obviously in love. When they finally broke apart, Robert reached into his pocket and pulled out the cheap ring he had bought weeks ago to maintain their cover story. "This is not much, but when we get back to the ranch, I will get you a proper ring. My grandmother's if you want it. My mother has been saving it for when I got married." "This ring is perfect," Lila said, slipping it onto her finger, "because you gave it to me, and that makes it worth more than gold." They wrote to Margaret that night, telling her about the engagement. Her reply came 2 days later, full of joy and excitement. She had already started planning, she wrote, and the whole territory would be invited to the wedding. But first, they had to get through the trial. The day finally arrived. The territorial courthouse in Guthrie was packed with spectators, journalists, and curious onlookers. Thornton's arrest had been big news, and everyone wanted to see how the drama would unfold. Lila sat in the witness room, trying to calm her racing heart, while Robert held her hand. "You can do this," he said quietly. Just remember what we practiced. Tell the truth, look at the jury, do not let his lawyers intimidate you. What if I break down? What if I cannot get through it? Then you take a breath, compose yourself, and continue. There is no shame in showing emotion. You are testifying about trauma. Anyone with half a heart will understand. When they called her to the stand, Lila walked into the courtroom with her head high. She saw Thornton sitting at the defense table, flanked by expensive lawyers, looking arrogant and unconcerned. She saw the jury, 12 men ranging from young to old, watching her with expressions from sympathetic to skeptical. She saw Robert sitting in the front row and drew strength from his steady gaze. The prosecutor, Catherine Porter, led her through her testimony gently. Lila told her story from the beginning. Being hired as a housekeeper, the initial months of normal work, then the changes in Thornton's behavior, the unwanted advances, the escalating aggression when she refused, the attack in her room and the beating that followed. The 4 days locked up with no food, the desperate escape. "Why did you take Mr. Thornton's horse?" Porter asked. "Because I knew he would chase me, and I needed the fastest horse available to have any chance of getting away. I understand it was theft. But I felt that my life was in immediate danger, and saving my life was more important than respecting his property rights." "Did you intend to keep the horse permanently?" "No. I planned to leave it at the first town I reached and continue on foot. I just needed it to get far enough away that he could not easily catch me." The cross-examination was brutal. Thornton's lead attorney, a slick man named Vincent Carr, tried every tactic in the book to discredit her. He implied she had been a willing participant in a relationship that went sour. He suggested she had stolen the horse out of spite, not fear. He questioned why she had not gone to the local sheriff instead of running. "Perhaps because Mr. Thornton's influence extended to the local law enforcement," Lila replied steadily. "The sheriff in Kingfisher does business with Mr. Thornton regularly. He would not have believed me over his wealthy patron. Or perhaps because you knew your accusations were false and would not hold up to scrutiny." "No, sir. Because I knew that women who accuse powerful men of assault are rarely believed and often punished for speaking up. I chose survival over justice because I did not think I could have both. And yet here you are, having found people willing to believe your convenient story. People who are now engaged to you, I understand. Is it not true that you are betrothed to Robert Hayes, the man who is harboring you?" "I am engaged to Robert Hayes, yes. But that happened after he helped me, not before. He showed me kindness when I desperately needed it, and we fell in love." "That does not make my testimony false. How convenient to find both protection and a wealthy husband in one stroke." "Objection," Catherine Porter said sharply. "Counsel is making statements, not asking questions." "Sustained. Mr. Carr, ask questions or sit down." But the damage was done. Lila could see some of the jury members looking skeptical now, wondering if she was a victim or an opportunist. She glanced at Robert, who gave her an encouraging nod. She took a breath and addressed the jury directly. "I know how this looks. I know it seems too convenient, a poor woman finding a rich protector. But I swear to you on everything I hold sacred, I am telling the truth about what Marcus Thornton did to me. And I am not the only one. Ask Sarah McCann. Ask Jack Ridley. They will confirm what I have said. This is not about money or marriage or convenience. This is about a powerful man who thought he could do whatever he wanted to women because no one would stop him. Well, I am stopping him, right here, right now. And I hope you will help me do it." The courtroom was silent when she finished. Even Carr seemed momentarily at a loss for words. The judge cleared his throat. "Does counsel have any further questions for this witness?" "No, Your Honor." "Then Miss Greene is dismissed. Thank you for your testimony." Lila walked back to her seat on shaking legs. Robert reached out and squeezed her hand as she passed, and she held on tight. She had done it. She had told her story, faced down Thornton and his lawyers, and she had survived. The trial continued for 3 more days. Sarah McCann testified, nervous but firm in her account. Jack Ridley, looking uncomfortable but determined, corroborated the imprisonment and Thornton's bragging. The prosecution presented medical testimony about the injuries Lila had sustained, though the doctor admitted the bruises had mostly healed by the time he examined her weeks later. Thornton himself took the stand, smooth and confident, painting Lila as a troubled young woman who had developed an inappropriate infatuation with him. He claimed he had rejected her advances gently, and she had reacted by stealing his horse and making false accusations to cover her crime. It was a compelling performance, and Lila's heart sank as she watched the jury members nodding along, but Catherine Porter was ready for him. On cross-examination, she systematically destroyed his credibility, pointing out contradictions between his testimony and the accounts of multiple witnesses. She brought up the other women who had left his employ under suspicious circumstances. She asked why, if Lila was so troubled, he had kept her on as an employee for nearly a year. "Perhaps because you found her useful for purposes other than housekeeping," Porter suggested. "Perhaps because you believed you could do whatever you wanted to her without consequence." "I object to this character assassination," Carr shouted. "My client is not on trial for his general character, only for the specific charges filed. And those charges relate directly to his character and pattern of behavior toward women in his employ." "I will allow it," the judge ruled. By the time the prosecution rested, Thornton looked less confident and more cornered. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, a time that felt like 6 years to Lila. She sat in the courthouse hallway with Robert, unable to eat or drink, simply waiting for her fate to be decided. Finally, they were called back in. The jury foreman stood, a middle-aged rancher with a weathered face and kind eyes. "On the charge of assault, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of unlawful imprisonment, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of intimidation and threatening a witness, we find the defendant guilty." The courtroom erupted. Thornton's face went purple with rage, and he lunged toward the prosecutor's table before his lawyers restrained him. The judge banged his gavel repeatedly, calling for order. When the noise finally died down, he turned to Thornton with cold eyes. "Mr. Thornton, you have been found guilty of serious crimes against a woman in your employ. Your wealth and influence do not place you above the law. I hereby sentence you to 15 years of hard labor in the territorial prison. In addition, you are ordered to pay restitution to Miss Greene in the amount of $5,000 for pain and suffering caused. This court is adjourned." Lila sat in stunned silence as the judge left and the courtroom emptied. 15 years, $5,000. She had won. Not just won, but won decisively. Thornton would be an old man by the time he was released, his power broken, his reputation destroyed. And she was free, truly free, with no charges hanging over her head and money enough to start a new life. Robert pulled her to her feet and into his arms. "It is over. It is really over. We won," she said, still not quite believing it. "We actually won. You won," he corrected. "You were brave enough to speak up, to fight back, to risk everything for justice. I am so proud of you." Marshal Hawthorne came over to shake their hands. "Well done, Miss Greene. That took real courage. And you, Mr. Hayes, you are a good man for standing by her through this." "It was an honor," Robert said simply. They left Guthrie the next day, riding back toward the Hayes ranch with light hearts and hope for the future. The prairie stretched out before them, golden and endless under the autumn sun. As they rode, they made plans. They would marry in the spring, Margaret insisted, so there would be time to plan properly. They would use part of the restitution money to expand the ranch and the rest to start Lila's school. They would build a life together, raise children, maybe even get involved in territorial politics to fight for better laws protecting women and workers. "We will have a good life," Robert said as the ranch came into view. "I promise you that." "We already do," Lila replied. "Everything else is just details." Margaret met them on the porch, her face alight with joy. "Thank God you are home safe. I have been worried sick." She hugged Lila tightly. "I heard about the trial. The whole territory is talking about it. You did a brave thing standing up to that monster." "I had a lot of help," Lila said, looking at Robert. "Well, you are family now. That is what families do. They help each other." Margaret pulled back and studied them both. "Now we have a wedding to plan. I am thinking early May when the wildflowers are blooming. We can set up tables outside, invite the whole county." "Mama, we just got home. Can we at least rest before you start organizing our lives? Rest is for people who have time to waste." "Come inside, both of you. I have supper waiting and then we will start making lists." The next few months passed in a happy blur. The black stallion was returned to the territorial authority, which sold it at auction. The proceeds went to a fund for women who had been victims of assault, Catherine Porter's idea. Thomas grudgingly admitted that having Lila around had improved Robert's disposition considerably, and that he supposed she could stay. The ranch hands, who had been skeptical at first, warmed to Lila when they realized she could help with the accounts and even had good ideas about managing the cattle breeding program. Winter came, cold and sharp, but inside the ranch house there was warmth and laughter. Lila spent the long evenings reading to Margaret or teaching her, and the ranch hands to improve their literacy. She learned to cook properly, to sew, to manage a household. She also started making plans for her school, sketching out a curriculum and a budget, identifying families who would want to send their children. Robert worked harder than ever, driven by dreams of the future they were building together. He expanded the herd, negotiated new contracts with buyers in Kansas, even traveled to Oklahoma City to meet with other ranchers about forming a cooperative that would give them better bargaining power. When he was home, he and Lila would sit up late into the night, talking about everything and nothing, learning each other in all the small ways that mattered. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked him one evening in February as they sat by the fire. "Taking me in, standing against Thornton. It could have gone badly. You could have lost everything." "I never regret it," he said firmly. "Not for 1 second. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Lila. You make me want to be better, to do more, to build something that matters. You already were all those things. I just gave you a reason to show it. Then we bring out the best in each other. That is what love is supposed to do." Their wedding day arrived in early May, just as Margaret had planned. The weather cooperated beautifully, warm and sunny with just enough breeze to keep it comfortable. Margaret had transformed the ranch into something out of a fairy tale, with wildflowers everywhere and tables groaning under the weight of food. It seemed like everyone in the county had come, along with people from as far away as Guthrie and Oklahoma City. Lila wore a dress that Margaret and Sarah McCann had sewn together, simple white cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. She had wildflowers woven into her auburn hair, and she carried a bouquet of prairie roses. She looked, Robert thought as he watched her walk toward him, like the answer to a prayer he had not known he was praying. They were married by the circuit preacher under an arbor Thomas had built specially for the occasion. Robert's hands shook as he slipped his grandmother's ring onto Lila's finger, replacing the cheap substitute she had worn for months. Lila's voice was clear and strong as she said her vows, promising to love and honor him for the rest of her days. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the preacher said. "Mr. Hayes, you may kiss your bride." Robert did thoroughly to the cheers and whistles of the assembled guests. When they finally broke apart, both grinning, he whispered, "Hello, Mrs. Hayes." "Hello, Mr. Hayes." "Ready to start our life together?" "I have been ready since the day I met you." The celebration lasted well into the evening, with music and dancing and more food than anyone could possibly eat. Marshall Hawthorne had traveled from Guthrie to attend, along with Catherine Porter and her husband. Even Jack Ridley showed up, having found new employment at a ranch where his honesty was appreciated rather than discouraged. Sarah McCann came too, bringing a beautiful quilt she had made as a wedding gift. "I am so happy for you," Sarah told Lila during a quiet moment. "You deserve all the joy in the world after what you went through. So do you. Have you thought about what you will do now? Actually, Mrs. Hayes was telling me about your school. She said you might need help once it gets going. I am good with children and I can read and write tolerably well. If you need an assistant teacher, I would be honored to work with you." "Sarah, that would be wonderful. Yes, absolutely, we will make this work together." As the sun set and the party began to wind down, Robert and Lila slipped away to the small house Thomas and the ranch hands had built for them over the winter. It was not large, but it was theirs, with a bedroom, a kitchen, a sitting room, and a small office where Lila could plan her lessons and Robert could manage ranch business. "Welcome home, Mrs. Hayes," Robert said, carrying her over the threshold despite her laughing protests. "Our home," she corrected, looking around at the simple but comfortable space. "Ours together." That night they consummated their marriage with tenderness and care, Robert patient and gentle, making sure Lila felt safe and loved every moment. For Lila, it was a revelation after the violence she had experienced with Thornton. This was what intimacy was supposed to be: a sharing, a gift freely given and received, an expression of love rather than power. Afterward they lay tangled together in the darkness, and Lila felt more at peace than she had ever been in her life. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too, always and forever." Forever sounds perfect. The school opened in September, housed in a converted outbuilding on the Hayes Ranch. 15 children showed up the first day, ranging in age from 5 to 14. Their parents grateful for the opportunity to give them an education. Lila proved to be a natural teacher, patient and creative, finding ways to make lessons interesting even for students who had never been enthusiastic about learning. Sarah assisted her, and together they created a warm, welcoming environment where children felt safe to ask questions and make mistakes. Robert was endlessly proud of his wife, watching her transform from a frightened fugitive into a confident educator who was making a real difference in their community. The ranch continued to prosper too, benefiting from his hard work and Lila's keen eye for numbers and management. They made a good team in all things, balancing each other's strengths and supporting each other through challenges. A year after their wedding, Lila discovered she was pregnant. The news filled both of them with joy and a little bit of terror. They would be parents, responsible for a tiny human life, charged with raising a child to be good and strong and kind. It was overwhelming and exciting all at once. "What if I am not good at it?" Lila worried as her belly began to swell. "What if I do something wrong?" "Then we will figure it out together," Robert said, his hand resting on her stomach, feeling the baby kick. "We have gotten through everything else together. We will get through this too." Their son was born in March of 1893, a healthy baby boy with his father's gray-blue eyes and his mother's dark hair. They named him Samuel, after Robert's father, and called him Sam. He was a happy, curious baby who brought even more laughter and light into their home. Margaret was in heaven with a grandchild to spoil. Thomas, who had married a schoolteacher from Guthrie the previous year, was expecting his own child and took his uncle duties seriously. The ranch house and the little house nearby were full of family, full of love, full of the kind of life Lila had once thought impossible for someone like her. 2 years later, they had a daughter. They named her Rose, and she was as different from her brother as could be, quiet and thoughtful where Sam was boisterous and adventurous. Lila balanced teaching. Now, with an enrollment of 30 students in a proper schoolhouse, the community had helped build with motherhood, and somehow made it look effortless, even though Robert knew how hard she worked. One evening, when Sam was 5 and Rose was 3, they sat on the porch of their house watching the children play in the yard. The school was thriving. The ranch was successful. They had family and friends and a place in their community. Marcus Thornton was still in prison and would be for many years yet, his power broken, his name a cautionary tale. "Did you ever imagine this?" Lila asked, leaning against Robert's shoulder. "That day you saw me ride into Kingfisher on a stolen horse, did you imagine any of this?" "No," Robert admitted. "I just knew you needed help and I wanted to be the one to give it. Everything else was a gift I did not see coming. You saved my life that day. You know that, do you not? If you had not helped me, I would have died. Either Thornton would have caught me and killed me, or I would have ended up dead on the trail somewhere. You gave me everything. You gave me just as much. Before I met you, I was going through the motions, working the ranch, living a good life but not a full one. You made me see what was possible. You challenged me to be better, to fight harder, to dream bigger. We saved each other, Lila. That is how the best loves work." She turned to kiss him, slow and sweet. "I love you, Robert Hayes, more than I can ever say." "Show me instead," he suggested with a smile. "We have a few hours before the children need to be put to bed. You are incorrigible, and you love it. I really do." As the sun set over the Oklahoma prairie, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the Hayes family went inside to their warm, happy home. The journey had been hard, the obstacles sometimes seeming insurmountable, but they had made it through together. They had built a life rich with love and purpose, full of children and community and hope for the future. Lila Greene Hayes, who had once ridden into Kingfisher on a stolen horse with nothing but desperation driving her forward, now had everything she had ever wanted and more than she had ever dared dream. She had a husband who cherished her, children who brought her joy, work that mattered, and a place where she belonged. She was no longer running from her past but building her future, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one love at a time. And Robert, the cowboy who had protected her when the truth came out, who had stood between her and danger without hesitation, who had loved her fiercely from almost the first moment, had found in her a partner equal to any challenge and worthy of every risk. Together, they had turned a desperate encounter into a lifetime of happiness, proving that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unlikely beginnings. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and challenges. Sam grew into a strong, principled young man much like his father, eventually taking over much of the ranch management. Rose, quiet and studious, became a teacher herself, working alongside her mother in the school that had expanded to serve students from all over the county. They had 2 more children, another boy and girl, twins born when Lila was 32, bringing the Hayes household to a chaotic but joyful 6 people. The school continued to grow, gaining a reputation as one of the best in the territory. When Oklahoma achieved statehood in 1907, Lila was invited to serve on the state education board, an honor she accepted with pride. She used her position to advocate for better teacher training and increased funding for rural schools, making sure other children got the opportunities she had worked so hard to create. Robert expanded the ranch steadily, always careful never to overreach, building something sustainable that could be passed down through generations. He got involved in territorial and then state politics as he had once dreamed, serving 2 terms in the state legislature, where he pushed for laws protecting workers' rights and women's suffrage. People respected him as a man who kept his word and fought for what was right, regardless of personal cost. Marcus Thornton served his full sentence and was released from prison in his late 60s, broken in health and spirit. He left Oklahoma Territory and was never heard from again. Occasionally, Lila would think about him and feel not anger or fear, but a kind of distant pity. He had wasted his power and privilege on cruelty when he could have done so much good. His choices had destroyed him, while her choices, hard as they had been, had built a life worth living. As they grew older together, Robert and Lila only became closer. They developed the kind of partnership that comes from decades of shared experiences, of weathering storms together, of building dreams into reality. They knew each other's thoughts before they were spoken, could communicate with a glance across a crowded room, found comfort simply in each other's presence. Their grandchildren came in time, Sam's children and Rose's, filling the ranch with new generations of laughter and chaos. Robert taught them to ride and rope and work cattle, passing down the skills his father had taught him. Lila taught them their letters and numbers, just as she had taught their parents, watching them discover the magic of learning. On their 40th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. There were dozens of people now, children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, along with extended family and friends accumulated over a lifetime. They had a big barbecue with music and dancing, much like their wedding day 4 decades earlier. As the party wound down and the younger folks started drifting toward home, Robert and Lila found themselves alone on the porch of the house where they had spent so many evenings together. They sat in their rocking chairs, hands clasped between them, watching the sun set over land they had worked and loved for 40 years. "You have any regrets?" Robert asked, a question he had not posed in a very long time. Lila thought about it seriously. "I regret that I had to go through what I did with Thornton. I regret the pain and fear, but I do not regret where it led me because it led me to you. So no, I do not have regrets. Everything that happened made me who I am, and I am happy with who I became." "I am happy with who you became too," Robert said, squeezing her hand. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Lila Hayes. These 40 years have been the greatest gift of my life." "Only 40, she teased. "You mean you are not tired of me yet?" "I will never be tired of you. When I am 100 years old and you are 98, I will still feel the same way I felt that first day in Kingfisher when I saw you trying to be brave. I will still want to protect you and love you and spend every moment I can by your side." "Well, that is good because you are stuck with me." She leaned over to kiss his weathered cheek. "Forever and always, just like we promised." "Forever and always," he agreed. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge overhead, the same stars that had watched over them through all the years of their journey together. From frightened fugitive and idealistic cowboy to successful educator and respected rancher, from young lovers to grandparents surrounded by the fruits of their love, they had traveled a remarkable path together. The story that had begun with a desperate woman riding into town on a stolen horse and a cowboy brave enough to protect her had become a love story for the ages. It had become a life built on courage and trust, on standing up for what was right even when it was difficult, on believing that love could transform even the darkest circumstances into something beautiful. As the night deepened and the prairie wind whispered through the grass, Robert and Lila Hayes sat together on their porch, holding hands as they had done for 40 years, content in the knowledge that they had lived well and loved deeply. They had faced down evil, built something lasting, raised children who would carry forward their values, and found in each other a love that had only grown stronger with time. It was, they both agreed, a very good life indeed. The best either of them could have asked for, and more than either had dared hope for during those uncertain days so long ago. But they had made it through together, and that had made all the difference. The end.